Okay, guys, so this is the recording for Unit 1, Lessons 4 and 5. Once again, I apologize that Blackboard doesn't like my document camera, but hopefully you guys will be able to see everything through here. Alright, so once again, things that we're using today, we're using a couple different types of rulers, 3 to 4 different things to measure. The graduated cylinder you can use out of your kit. I'm also going to be using a syringe, and then the scales from your kit, and then 3 to 4 different liquids, so like corn syrup and stuff like that. And then the table to write things down with. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I have some corn syrup here. So light corn syrup. I have canola oil. I have rubbing alcohol. So 70%. And then I also have water. So, first thing I'm going to do with these is have this little tube here. It looks like it is a test tube, but it's actually what they call a preform. The preform to what though? This is actually a 2-liter bottle. So when it gets made and shipped to the bottling plants, it actually is just the plastic piece like this. And then it goes into the form, and they actually squirt in hot air in here, and this will actually expand to actually take the shape of the 2-liter. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour some of the corn syrup in, some of the canola oil, some of the alcohol, and some of the water. Okay? It doesn't really matter which amount, or try to get equal amounts, but you can pour whichever one's in first. You might want to do this in a kitchen just so you don't make as much of a mess as I might make. You don't need very much of everything, you just need enough so you can see it. Alright, so here I have all my liquids in here. So you can guys see the couple different colors. Now, realize that most of this are clear colors. So I'm actually having some food coloring here. You don't need very much of the food coloring, so just a drop or two is really all you need. Once you put a couple drops in, make some observation of what's going on. So you can see the dyes kind of going around the different levels here. So if you, I'm going to put the lid on this before I make a mess. So if you can look, tilt it here sideways slightly. There's a band here. There's a light little band here. And then you notice there's a band here too, so it doesn't go all the way down. So we talked about in class today that the more dense or the thicker, most of the times the thicker, heavier stuff is going to be down here at the bottom. So this is here is going to be your corn syrup. So now what's going to happen is we're going to mix it up. So we're going to mix all of them up. See, that corn syrup still does not want to be separated. So now we have the top part mixed. It's all nice and red. And we're actually going to set this aside and look at it again a little bit later. So we're going to give it everything time to kind of separate back out. Alright, so let's go ahead and look at the table. So this is the table we're going to be using. So this is going to be our final table. If you'd like, you can do some scratch paper and write down your measurements before you put it on your final one. Alright, so let's go ahead and let's go ahead and fill in this chart. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is look at the different rulers that we have. So I have a regular ruler. So we have inches on one side. We have centimeters on the other. So like we talked about yesterday, we're using the SI units. So we want to make sure that we're using the centimeter side. I have a measuring tape. There you go. And I also have a paper measuring tape. So it is just a piece of paper. Then I also have a cloth measuring tape. So I got inches on one side, centimeters on the other side. So those are going to be our measuring tools. And now what are we going to measure? Well, we're going to measure a nail. We are going to measure the side of this plastic candle. We are going to look at the diameter of the tip. So that's actually a cake decorating tip. So like if you're doing large balloons, or if you're doing fillings, or even cupcakes, you could use this. Then we are looking at a playing card. So I have the Queen of Hearts. We are actually going to be measuring the black line on this side. And then the last one thing that I have up there is a cake decorating side scraper. That's actually what this is. So that's like after you ice your cake, you can go around the edges with this to give those nice lines. So let's go ahead, we'll start with the nail. Alright, so we are going to do tip to tip. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use our ruler. So one thing when you're measuring, you have to make sure that everything's lining up tips to the last mark and to the top. So this one here, just by eyeballing real quick, I would say 6 centimeters. So we can write that underneath a ruler on our table. So let's put 6 cm. And then we'll switch. We can look at the cloth one. So if you see, this one here is looking just past. So we're looking probably about 6.1 centimeters. So you can write that in. And if you don't have the same things as I have when you're measuring, that's completely fine. Just make sure that your table reflects what you have. So now we're going to look at the paper. So this one we can actually set the nail on it. And roll up slightly. So if you roll down, you guys can see that it's right there. Just over that 6 centimeter line, so we're actually looking probably about 6.1 again. And now for the metal one, what's great about this, it has that lip on the end. So really we can put the nail there. So we'll probably do it this way, put the head on it. And so we can see about where it is, and we can actually put our thumbnail, this one, right at the edge. We can kind of pinch it. And we can look on this side, and this is saying that it's about actually 5.9. But you gotta remember, we were actually in this little bit here too. So that lip makes up about that 0.1 difference. So we can say that that's 6 centimeters as well. So we could say we can go through all those, but I mean the nail is gonna be about the same way. So we can go through this. So here is the candle. So we can just, once again, from point to point. You can just look at that and kind of compare those. Same thing for your playing card. Go through and get your numbers from black outside, black outside. So going from this point over to this point. The cake decorating tip from the outside straight across to the other outside. And the side scraper. Whichever side you like, just again make sure that we're measuring the same side. So then you can measure from this tip to this tip. Okay, measure that each way. And don't let your measurements from one instrument, so like the cloth tape measure, affect your measurements from like the ruler. So when you get your data, there might be a little discrepancies. So let me go ahead and do these real quick, and I will show you what I have, and I'll fill it in on the board. Alright, so now that we have filled out So take a notice on some of the stuff. So you see, if there's about a tenth of a difference, sometimes a little bit more, depending on what we're measuring and what we're measuring with. Now, in reality, is the size actually changing depending on the ruler? No. What's changing is the instrument we're using to measure it. So some are more precise and accurate than others. And plus, there's always human error. Maybe when I pulled up the candle, that because this side is rounded, maybe that changed how the ruler or the measuring tapes got that measurement. Or like on the playing card here, there's a difference to if the line went from the outside of the black. So there's a difference if the line went from the outside of the black or if it went to the inside of the black. So the line has a thickness to it, so you have to make sure that you're measuring from the same spot on either side. So if you're going from outside to outside, or if you're going from inside to inside. So then, in some cases, like the card down here, we could have rounded a little different. So you can see most of these were the same, except this one here, the ruler, was at 4.1. Well, that could be because, the distance off the table of a ruler versus the measuring tapes is not as flat. It's up maybe about 3 or 4 millimeters. So that sight difference could change it. And then really, when I was using the measuring tapes and stuff here, I rounded up to 4.2. It was really coming across right about 4.5 or so. So it's definitely over 4.1, but not quite to 4.2. So let's go ahead and look at some density. So we talked about earlier that density is mass over volume. So if we're going to find a mass of an object, we can use the graduated cylinder, or actually I'm going to use my syringe because it's a 50 ml syringe. I'll show you how I'm going to use that. Alright, so here's my syringe. It's a 50 ml syringe. So here would be where the needle would be hooked up onto it. But what I'm actually going to do, because the graduated cylinder that you guys got in your kit is huge. It goes up to 250 milliliters. That's going to be a little more, if we're weighing something that's small, like lead weights, it's going to be really hard to see the difference if we're looking at something of this large. So we're actually going to be using, so it's just this space here from the bottom, but instead of using this, we're going to use my syringe. So a little less inaccurate because with the syringe, you only have by fives. So you have a 10 line, a 20 line that are marked, and then the dashes in between are halfway, so it's 10, 15, 20, and 25. Well, if you look at the graduated cylinder, it's marked a little bit, it has a little few more dashes there. You see all those raised lines? So it's going to be a little more inaccurate to use the syringe. But when we're using just some lead weights, it's going to be a little easier. Show you my lead weights here. I actually got to cast these this summer. So there's some lead weights. As you've noticed, this one here is a little slightly different color because that's actually not lead, that is tin. But we're going to use these, and we're going to use all of them, minus the tin. We won't use the tin right now, just the lead. So we're going to use the lead there. We're going to use the weights in the syringe to find the density. Okay, so these are my weights, and we're going to go ahead and weigh them out. So I have, so this is our little scale that you guys will have in your kit. Hopefully it works for you guys. When you first turn it on, you probably have to set the tare, so that is basically zeroing it out. So without having anything on it, you can just press this button over here on the side. And it will calculate it, and it will select out to 0. So I can take the weights and carefully put them all on here. Okay, so we're looking at 6 See, 3.9 grams. Make sure you know it's in grams. There is different settings on your scale, so make sure over here on the side that it does say G up in the little corner. Okay, so now we are going to take our syringe. We are going to fill it with about 30 milliliters of water. So that sounds like a good starting point. So let me get some water in that. All the air bubbles out. Alright, so here I have my 30 mils of water. This is going to be the fun part because I'm going to plug this in. I'm actually going to take the plunger out so that I can put the weights in. Okay, so I have the plunger out. Keep my finger on that. So I have my 30 mils of water in there. You can also keep the plunger out to start with and just fill up to 30. So I'm going to put my weights in. Okay, so all the weights are in there. So when you're measuring it, you want to make sure you tittle up straight so that you actually get a complete line. It's all in there. So if I look, it's actually right at 35, or at least from my vision and my standpoint. It's right at this line here. So I can actually empty this out. Just to make sure whatever you are weighing out to find the density of, that you weigh it before you get it wet. You don't want to get water on your scale. So we started at 30. I got it right upside down. This is funny. So we started at 30 milliliters. We ended at 35. Okay, so that difference leaves us with 5 milliliters. Okay, so now we know this is the volume. And we also know that our mass was the 63.9. And that was grams. Okay, so now we can plug that into the equation. So here's our equation. So now we can go ahead, run the math, and we have that the density, is 12.78 grams, that is a G, grams per milliliter. So we can look here and see that the density of lead is actually 11.342 grams per cubic centimeter, or grams per milliliter. So what does that tell us about what we did? Because remember, we had 12.78, so there's a slight difference. They're not way off, but a couple things could happen. One, our scale didn't go out to enough decimal places. It could be that we used a syringe, not really accurate there. And it also could be that my pure lead weights might not be pure lead. Might be other metals and stuff in there, so that it's not all lead. Okay, so now I want you guys to quickly look at this and tell me what color the liquid is inside of this other preform. So what color is that? I would say that that's green, right? Are you sure it's all green, that everything in this test tube is green? So if you look, it's actually changing colors. So what was all green now has blue in it. Oh, now that's just a tricky little thing, isn't it? So this is actually 70% rubbing alcohol and water. If you want to do this at home, you can actually start off with, it's a 3-to-1 ratio, so 3 parts rubbing alcohol, 1 part water. Because if it's 70% alcohol, rubbing alcohol, that other 30% is actually water. So once you put it in the tube, it's almost a 50-50 ratio to water to then rubbing alcohol. But if you notice, there's stuff floating in it. One other thing, to get it to work like this, just use green food coloring. That's all that is in there is green food coloring, because the green actually separates out into the blue, and then you'll have to add some table salt to it. But if you look, there's some stuff floating here, and I don't know if it's going to let me tip it up, but there's actually ones down here too. If I can, oh, you can see some of them. Alright, so you can't really see it. Oh, there they are, slightly white pieces there. Those are actually both types of plastic. So I actually have some baggies with them in it. Let me show you. Let's put down some blue paper so you can see the white plastic. So that's the first plastic that we have. So what do you notice about them? They're very white. They're not like opaque, or you can't really see through it. Very white. Now versus this other ones, a little brighter, a little more shiny, a little more the light can go through it, a little more transparent there. So there are two different types, or main types of plastic. You have what they call low density and high density polymers. One of these is a high density, the other one's a low density. Both of them are in this tube. Where do you think we'd find the low density plastic beads? Yeah, those are going to be the ones right here in the center. And the high density ones are the ones that are sinking to the bottom, because remember, the higher the density, the lower it's going to be in a test tube. Okay? Alright, so let's look at our little test tube from earlier. Alright. So first thing you notice is that you can see about 3 layers here. So up here you have a clear layer. Then you have this nice red layer. And then down here you have another clear area. You have another clear area. If I move around too much, it's going to mix back up. So hopefully this. You can see that at the top there's that clear area, and the center part, that's all the red, and the bottom part, that is clear again. So really what's going on here is that the water did separate some out to the top. The oil and alcohol actually did mix together, so that's why there's a large area in the center. And then at the very bottom you have the corn syrup, and the corn syrup has the highest density. It doesn't want to mix with anyone. Okay, so just a brief quick on density. So this is how we went through and we found the mass of my lead weights. So if an object has a mass of 5 grams and a value of 5 milliliters, you just plug it into the equation. So this would be 3 grams per milliliter. And then we went over this later, so you see that honey is really dense, followed by that corn syrup, maple syrup, milk, dish soap, water, vegetable oil, rubbing alcohol, and lamp oil. And if you were in class today, we did talk about how with the lamp oil, you would want it to be less dense than water, because if you have a lamp that you're having the wick in and you're burning it, you want the wick to absorb all the oil before anything else, because if you have a wet wick, it's not going to burn. The oil lets it burn. So if you think about if you had rubbing oil, or you have the lamp oil and water in the same container, the lamp oil would stay on top, which means that would be what the wick would be touching first. And so that's when it would be soaking up. So it's a good thing that the lamp oil is less dense than water. And if you notice here too, we actually have a ping pong ball, a bar of soap, we have some beads in there, there's a cherry tomato, there's popcorn kernel, which is right there, and then we have a bolt. So if you notice, metal tends to be more dense than some of the polymers. So we can find out or almost pretty close to, what a substance is just by finding out its density. And then we're going to learn over some dry measuring cups. So those are things that you're going to use for like flour, cornstarch, pancake mix, stuff like that. You're going to be using the measuring cups. These are the dry ones. And then if you're using a wet measuring cup, that's for liquids like milk, oil, water, etc. And these are calibers. So these are stuff that if you want to be more precise with your measurements, these are what you'll be using here. So on the small side here, like if you're going to measure the inside of like a washer or a bead, you could actually pull these apart. So these would be on the inside, so you can actually measure that. Or if you're going to measure the outside, so it'd be looking at using this one here, so you'd pinch it in between versus pulling it apart. Once again, I apologize for the Blackboard not liking the document camera. So hopefully you guys got to see a couple of the cool things going on here. And if you guys have any questions, please let me know. Have a great day. Thank you.